Iran hides its darkest truths behind markets, courtyards, deserts, and silence. Visitors notice blue domes, warm tea, handmade carpets, and generous smiles. But under that beauty waits another country, older, colder, and far less forgiving. Its past does not rest safely behind glass inside quiet museum rooms anymore. It rises through cracked streets, forgotten wells, and foundations split by time. These 5 stories remain the strongest because they linger after the telling ends. Each begins with something ordinary, then opens into something deeply unsettling. Together, they reveal a place where history never fully releases the living. In Iran, the ground remembers even when people try hard not to listen today. One shovel, one collapsed well, or one cracked wall can bring everything back. Mosques, bazaars, and houses stand above older rooms, bones, and unanswered fears. That is why beauty in Iran often seems touched by something colder underneath. The surface glows with color, yet the hidden layers keep pulling the eye down. To understand these stories, you must first accept that nothing is truly buried. The first secret waits outside Yazd on a desert ridge burned pale by sunlight. 2 low stone hills rise from the plain like harmless natural mounds at first. From a distance, nothing about them warns visitors to keep away from the slopes. But the climb changes everything before anyone even reaches the summit itself. At the top sits a circular platform open to heat, wind, and circling birds. This was a dakma, better known as a Zoroastrian tower of silence outside Yazd. For centuries, families brought their dead to that exposed stone circle above Yazd. They did not bury bodies because sacred earth could not be polluted by flesh. They did not burn bodies because fire was treated as something holy and alive. They did not place bodies in water, since water also had to remain ritually pure. Only one answer remained, and it still feels brutal to a modern imagination. The dead were laid on stone, where waiting vultures could reach them without delay. Men, women, and children were placed in separate rings near the central pit. Then the mourners withdrew, leaving the body to heat, wind, silence, and wings. Sometimes the birds came quickly, darkening the platform within a few minutes. Within hours, flesh disappeared, and sun-bleached bones were all that remained. For Zoroastrians, this was not cruelty, but discipline shaped by sacred order. The body was only a shell after the soul had already departed beyond the world. Feeding the birds returned death to life through one final act of sacred respect. That belief is disturbing to outsiders, yet it carries a harsh and ancient grace. What unsettles visitors most is how recently the towers were still being used. Older residents remembered funeral processions moving toward the hills in white. They remembered birds gathering overhead before the mourners had fully departed. On still days, the smell drifted down toward neighborhoods below the towers. The government eventually banned the rite, but memory kept it painfully close. Some families adapted to concrete graves that kept bodies from touching the soil. Even that compromise felt heavy, because belief rarely changes without a scar. The pits are empty now, and the bones have long since been removed from view. Still, the stone circle keeps its terrible shape beneath the open desert light. A lone bird crossing the sky can make the entire platform feel suddenly awake. There is no monster there, only a culture refusing to soften death for anyone. The tower forces visitors to imagine a body becoming wind, bone, and memory. It is terrible because it is honest,
and beautiful because it never pretends. The first secret begins with death, but it ends with the living standing uneasy. The second secret begins far below the surface, inside a hidden Iranian cave. Explorers entered through an opening barely wide enough for one body at a time. Beyond the narrow passage, their lights opened onto a chamber covered in images. Figures of hunters, animals, and horned beings moved across the stone walls. Some shapes looked human, while others seemed to belong to ritual or nightmare. The drawings were made with ochre and charcoal thousands of years before us. At first, the cave looked like a rare window into prehistoric imagination and faith. Then the deeper chamber changed the discovery from wonder into something colder. Along the walls lay human skulls, arranged too carefully to seem accidental.
They were not scattered by water, animals, or the slow collapse of ancient stone. Many faced inward, as if watching a ceremony whose meaning had entirely vanished. Several skulls carried round openings cut through the bone with unsettling precision. Anthropologists suspected trepanation, one of the oldest surgeries known to humanity. Some skulls had healing edges, proving certain patients survived the procedure. That detail makes the cave stranger than any simple legend about sacrifice alone. Ancient hands had opened living skulls and somehow avoided killing everyone. They worked without modern anesthesia, sterile tools, or scientific maps of the brain. Other skulls showed no healing, which means the cutting happened after death. That question has never received an answer strong enough to settle the chamber. Why open the skull of someone who had already left the world behind forever? One theory says priests made openings so spirits could leave the body freely. Another suggests bone fragments were collected for medicine, magic, or private rites. A darker idea imagines trophies from enemies displayed beneath the earth as proof. But women and children were found there, which weakens any simple war story. The chamber may have been a clinic, shrine, grave, and warning all together. The skulls seem to look back from a world older than ordinary written memory. They suggest fear, healing, death, and belief once shared the same hidden room. Modern researchers can measure holes, dates, pigments, and bones with precision.
Yet the chamber's purpose remains hidden behind the silent faces of the dead there. It does not need ghosts, because the human evidence is already disturbing enough. The deeper you follow the passage, the less ordinary history begins to feel. The cave asks whether ancient medicine and ancient terror were ever truly separate. The third secret belongs to Hamadan, one of the world's oldest living cities. It stands on a high plateau where mountains surround the streets like witnesses. That position once made Hamadan wealthy, crowded, connected, and dangerously exposed. Merchants came through with silk, spices, stories, animals, insects, and disease. When plague entered a city like Hamadan, it did not arrive politely or slowly. It moved through markets, stables, courtyards, bedrooms, and crowded alleys. Medieval accounts describe houses where entire families died within a single night. The living could not remove bodies quickly enough to keep the streets clear. Panic pushed survivors outward, carrying sickness into villages beyond the walls. In some accounts, dogs grew wild after feeding on corpses left outside homes. Soon the normal cemeteries could not hold the number of the dead anymore there. Authorities ordered mass graves outside the city, away from ordinary daily sight.
Bodies were stacked in layers, dusted with lime, and buried without ceremony. There was no time for names, markers, long prayers, or proper family farewells. Hamadan survived by placing its catastrophe beneath itself and moving forward.
Over generations, the exact places of those plague pits disappeared from memory. The city expanded, and new streets crossed over old emergency burials unnoticed. Homes rose above ground that had once been opened for the desperate dead below. When modern workers later dug pipes, they sometimes struck dense layers of bone. A skull appearing in a trench could stop construction for an uneasy few days. Each discovery reopened a disaster that no monument had bothered to remember. The horror is not only that plague killed so many people in one terrible wave. It is that daily life returned calmly above their nameless remains afterward. Children played, shops opened, and families slept over forgotten mass burials. Hamadan was not alone. Tabriz, Isfahan, and Ray suffered similar crushing blows. Trade made cities powerful, but it also made them perfect corridors for infection. The Black Death devastated Iran and left some towns nearly emptied of life there. Beneath modern streets, the dead still occupy territory without signs or names. The city looks alive, yet beneath it lies a hidden map of old emergency graves. Every ordinary street may cross a place where grief was once stacked in layers. This secret is terrifying because it hides catastrophe beneath familiar city life. The fourth secret is Nushabad, an underground city built from practical fear. Nushabad was rediscovered when a local man deepened the well in his own yard. The ground opened beneath him, dropping him into darkness under the sleeping town.
Neighbors pulled him out, then lowered lights into the unexpected hollow beneath. The beams revealed passages disappearing beneath the ordinary modern town of Nushabad. Archaeologists later uncovered 3 levels carved into soft limestone below Nushabad. There were rooms, wells, air shafts, storage spaces, corridors, and hiding places. This was not a natural cave, nor some random pocket beneath an ordinary street. It was a planned refuge designed for invasion, panic, hunger, and family survival. The tunnels were low enough to force attackers into slow and awkward movement. A soldier could not swing his sword properly inside those narrow underground corridors. He could not run, turn quickly, or advance without losing control of his body. Defenders could wait behind bends, hidden by darkness and the twisting design. Some passages led deeper into safety, while others ended in deliberate traps. An invader choosing wrongly in darkness could fall into a waiting pit below. Nushabad was not only hidden, it was built to make strangers helpless underground. Families used those tunnels during raids, invasions, and seasons of slaughter. They brought children, lamps, food, water, animals, and whatever hope remained. Imagine enemies burning your home while you sit several meters under the floor. Imagine holding a child silent because one cry could expose everyone hiding there. The walls still carry soot from lamps that burned through long waits underground. Small niches once held oil, food vessels, tools, and the necessities of hiding. The most haunting object was reportedly a small child's worn leather sandal. That sandal turns the tunnels from architecture into a human nightmare below. It proves children passed through those corridors, frightened, obedient, and unseen. They may have heard footsteps, screams, or silence from the world above them. The city over them could burn, while they stayed alive beneath its ruined streets. Nushabad was rediscovered by accident, but its purpose was never accidental. It belonged to generations that expected violence to return without warning. Every low passage says survival sometimes required darkness instead of courage. The safest place was not comfortable, clean, bright, or even fully breathable. It was simply the one place where enemies could not easily follow them underground. Nushabad remains one of Iran's most intimate monuments to practical human fear. Its horror comes from parents choosing darkness because the surface meant death. The tunnels survived because terror carved them deeper than any decoration could. Above them, daily life continued, never fully separate from the buried city. The fifth secret is the largest because it is still unfolding around people now. Iran is sinking, and that statement is not metaphor, exaggeration, or folklore. Satellite observations show severe land subsidence across large parts of the country. In some areas, the ground drops many centimeters every single year now without pause. Over time, that slow movement becomes strong enough to damage foundations badly. Roads crack, fields split open, and long wounds appear across the dry soil today. Houses lean, walls fracture, and doors no longer fit inside their frames. The cause is water, or more accurately, the disappearance of underground water. For decades, wells have drained aquifers faster than nature can refill them. When those hidden layers collapse, the soil above them loses its support entirely. The ground compacts and sinks, and it cannot simply rise again afterward anymore. Even if pumping stopped tomorrow, much of the damage would remain permanent. What once held villages and cities up becomes an empty, collapsing structure. The disaster is quiet, but its consequences may outlast many earthquakes to come. It spreads beneath neighborhoods while people keep drinking from the same crisis. The danger reaches far beyond farms, villages, and cracked suburban houses today. Historic monuments, mosques, bridges, railways, and roads all face growing risk. In Isfahan, the crisis threatens places that survived centuries of invasion. Dry riverbeds and cracked ground have become symbols of modern Iranian anxiety. Lake Urmia's collapse showed how quickly water systems can unravel in Iran today. Ancient qanats, once reliable underground channels, are failing in many regions. Now, old wisdom and new infrastructure are collapsing at exactly the same time. Near Tehran, subsidence threatens pipelines, power systems, gas lines, and housing. A crack through a street can become more than a simple geological scar today. It can warn that entire districts stand on ground losing strength below them. Scientists have mapped dangerous zones around several of Iran's major cities. The red areas on those maps spread like warnings across the country, not dots. People patch walls with cement because moving elsewhere is often impossible. Families return to damaged homes while the land continues settling under their feet. That makes subsidence terrifying because it destroys slowly enough to ignore. It also touches older horrors buried under cities, roads, and fields across Iran. When soil cracks, sealed layers from centuries ago can open unexpectedly again. Old plague burials and forgotten graves may surface during construction or collapse. Usually, those remains are not dangerous after so many centuries underground. Still, the image of a country reopening its wounds feels impossible to dismiss. The present crisis pulls every buried century painfully close again for everyone. The same land that carried empires now struggles to carry neighborhoods above it. Behind these 5 secrets stand real people, not just dramatic locations today. There were mourners walking toward the towers in white funeral clothing then. There were workers touching skulls while digging ordinary modern utility trenches. There were archaeologists entering caves where ancient faces seemed to watch. There were families under Nushabad begging frightened children to stay quiet. Homeowners now measure new cracks beside yesterday's repairs and hope they stop. That human layer turns these stories from atmosphere into something painfully real. Without people, a ruin is only stone, dust, weather, and empty time passing. With people, it becomes fear, love, hunger, ritual, grief, and survival under pressure. The last tower attendants reportedly remembered the waiting more than the birds. Sometimes they stood beside the dead for hours before vultures finally arrived. In winter, the stone stayed cold and the silence became even heavier around him. One attendant said he spoke to the dead because nobody else stood nearby that night. That detail carries more dread than almost any invented ghost story could manage. The farmer who found Nushabad wanted cleaner water, not a buried city below. Instead, the ground opened and a buried world breathed upward beneath his feet. Iran often reveals itself that way, unwillingly and without ceremony or warning. Something collapses, cracks, or opens, and another layer enters the present. Someone drinks tea above tunnels once filled with whispering refugees and fear. Someone sells fruit above bones buried hurriedly during a plague year long ago. Someone photographs a blue dome while the ground beneath it slowly sinks away. That contrast gives Iran its strange, almost unbearable narrative power and weight. Beauty remains real there, but it never cancels the darkness below it completely. All 5 secrets point downward toward earth, stone, bone, silence, and pressure. The towers ended with remains gathered into a pit after the birds finished feeding. The caves hid skulls in chambers sealed away from every trace of sunlight forever. Hamadan buried catastrophe under streets that later forgot the dead beneath them. Nushabad carved survival into darkness beneath ordinary houses and courtyards. The sinking ground shows the present dropping into its own emptiness again now. Again and again, Iran's most frightening stories begin below the visible surface. That pattern feels symbolic, but it is also brutally and physically real to them. The country's beauty rises in domes, poems, carpets, music, and hospitality. Its nightmares wait underneath, in dust, limestone, ash, water, bone, and darkness. Perhaps that is why Iranian beauty often feels so intensely alive to visitors. When people know darkness is below them, they value color above them more deeply. When the earth can open, the sky becomes more precious than ever before to anyone. Iran has waited thousands of years, and it is still waiting for the next shovel. The next secret may already be resting beneath someone's ordinary footsteps.